Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines. We have on the show the Inspector General for the entire state of Louisiana, Stephen Street. Inspector General Street is going to talk to us about what his office specifically does. They are missioned to make sure that they ferret out any fraud or malfeasance in office. He's going to talk about the process of filing a complaint so we can make sure that your tax dollars aren't being wasted. So join us on the next Legal Lines, the State Inspector, Stephen Street. Welcome to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and I'm very pleased to have on the show today Stephen Street. Stephen is the Inspector General for the entire state of Louisiana. Stephen, thanks for coming back on the show.
You,
it's been about a year.
It's been about a year. Glad to be here again.
Last time we were together, you were looking at getting some teeth or more teeth to go after folks, and that's happened in the last couple of sessions. Tell folks kind of where you are now in that process.
Well, we've actually pretty much retooled the entire Inspector General's office. I took office in January of 2008. In the very first special session, we got the statute that created the office and made it permanent under law and gave us several measures of independence. But the last time you and I talked, we were still in the middle of a legislative session.
I wasn't quite sure it was going to happen.
And we weren't. In fact, we had several hurdles to jump over, but at the end of that session, we ended up with a statute that has now designated the Inspector General as a law enforcement agency. We're fully statutorily empowered law enforcement agency.
Excellent.
And so,
got some teeth and some power.
Absolutely. And what we've done is to convert the office essentially into one that's focused on rooting out fraud and corruption in government. And we are in the business of making criminal cases wherever possible.
Excellent. And historically, this initially began, I think, with Governor Buddy Roemer. It was continued by every following governor, but then with Governor Jindal, who selected you, it's become a permanent position in our Louisiana government.
That's correct. The office is now established by law with a 6-year term for the Inspector General, subject to Senate confirmation. And the important thing about a 6-year term is that it overlaps the governor's 4-year term.
Interesting.
So that does not automatically mean that if a new governor comes in that there will be a new Inspector General, at least for 2 years.
Also makes it probably a little less political, I guess.
Well, that was the whole idea, Locke. The whole idea was to make sure that the office is going to be as apolitical as possible so that folks would just be about the business of trying to get to the truth rather than have separate agendas. And that gives the public confidence that that's not going on.
And you kind of said it, but is there like a kind of a mission statement, so to speak, or
yes,
areas of focus? What is that?
Well, in the statute, really, in the Louisiana law books, you can find the statute in Title 49, and the first part of the statute says that the mission of the office is to investigate fraud, corruption, waste, abuse, mismanagement, and the like in government.
Very broad.
It's very broad. And so what I did, once we got that statute, I organized the office into 2 divisions. I have a criminal investigation division, and then on the other side I have an audit division that performs essentially financial type audits.
It's really interesting. You wouldn't think that necessarily those would go together, but in this case it does.
Oftentimes they do, and in some situations they've actually worked the same cases where the financial auditors have uncovered fraud, which is then taken by the criminal investigators and taken to the point of arrest, indictment, prosecution.
And of course, your background fits that excellently.
Yes.
Tell the folks about your background.
Right. I come from a background as a criminal prosecutor, and prior to that, a criminal defense lawyer. I've worked since 1989.
Both sides of that fence.
Right. I've worked both sides since 1989. I've been involved in criminal justice pretty much at all levels, state, federal, and local. And as a prosecutor, I ran a white-collar fraud unit with the Attorney General's office.
So you're dealing with numbers. Probably.
Exactly. So I'm used to making complex public corruption cases. We did many of them when I was with the Attorney General's office, and so I brought that experience over to the Inspector General's office, and I think that was consistent with the governor's stated desire,
excellent,
which he ran on and got elected on.
Let's talk about your resources and your staff. You got some heavy hitters in there.
Well, I was very fortunate to be able to hire Greg Ferries, who, as many of your viewers will remember, was the sheriff of East Baton Rouge Parish.
Greg's actually been on the show.
And prior to that was our chief of police in Baton Rouge for many years.
I assume he's kind of handling the criminal side.
Greg's in charge of my criminal investigation unit, and he's a very seasoned person that has a lot of experience in criminal law enforcement and in particular investigating complex white-collar cases and other types of cases. And he brings a level of experience that's invaluable to me in terms of
30-something plus years.
Right, 30-something years, and we've also hired some other individuals that have great law enforcement background and are able to essentially get that unit up and running.
Excellent. Now the other side.
The audit division, I was fortunate to have some very able people already on staff from the previous Inspector General's administration, and I've got Ms. Cindy Summers is running my the audit unit. I'm sorry, and she's in charge of making sure that we get out there and be proactive and investigate not only complaints, but be proactive in trying to identify areas where we can save the taxpayers' money and identify fraud, stop the bleeding.
Now, what is the budget?
The budget for the IG's office right now is about $1.67 million.
And I guess you've got to fight for that every year?
Yes, that's a yearly deal where we go and participate in the budget process just like every other state agency.
Which has got to be tough these days.
Well, it can be difficult at times, but we've been able to demonstrate, Locke, that our office has identified on average about 3 times the amount of fraud, waste, abuse, and corruption each year
so in essence, y'all have brought in that amount of money on average for the last 10 years?
We've identified, the numbers over the 10 years before I took office was $50 million over a 10-year period, and that, when you have a budget that averages anywhere from $1.3 to $1.7 million, that's roughly 3 times that we've identified. And then there's other fraud and things that you cannot quantify. For instance, prevention. How do you put a dollar figure on that? We feel like
fear out there.
Yeah, we believe that the dollars are very well spent because we can show a demonstrable return on that investment.
Now, what is the size of your staff? I mean, do you have the folks you need? Because I know you were hoping to get teeth last session, and you were looking hopefully to get the ability to have more folks working. Well, how's that looking?
Well, right now our staff is about to increase by 1. Of course, we could always use more resources, but we have some very real budget challenges in state government right now, which I'm sure most of the viewers will be familiar with. We are working very hard to get more for our money and accomplish more with potentially less. But right now, the latest addition to our staff is that we had a senior management person just recently retire. Rather than fill that position, we chose to take the position and create 2 criminal investigator slots.
So down on the front line.
Correct, because that's where our biggest need is. We're trying to keep up with the caseload out in the field. We want people that can actually go and work those cases.
And as I understand it, what actually I love about this is that there's interagency or interbranches of government cooperation.
That's correct. We do.
Explain that to the folks.
Well, the statute very specifically authorizes the Inspector General to conduct joint investigations with other law enforcement and oversight agencies. So as a result of that, we've worked with the FBI, the Secret Service, the Attorney General, the Louisiana State Police. We've even worked with local law enforcement in a couple of occasions. It's just on an as-needed, whatever the circumstances of each case dictate. And if a particular agency that has jurisdiction over a criminal investigation would like our assistance, all they have to do is come and ask.
And vice versa.
And vice versa, exactly. And we have worked well. And that's one way to avoid duplicating.
Right. Save money and do it efficiently and effectively.
Exactly.
And that's worked well. No, you haven't found any butting of heads or turf wars?
Well, one of the things that's helped, Locke, is I come from the background as a prosecutor has made me very familiar with most of the law enforcement community. They know me, I know them. That goes double for Chief Ferries. As former Chief of Police, that's kind of what I call him. There's a lot of them know us and know what our track record is. And even though we're still relatively young as the Inspector General's office with the new authority that we've got, we still are able to work well with these other agencies. They know us and they trust us.
Well, let's talk about the process on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith, Legal Line. Stephen Street, the Inspector General for the state of Louisiana. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and again, pleased to have on the show today Stephen Street. He's the State Inspector General for Louisiana. Stephen, again, thanks for being on the show.
Glad to be here.
We kind of took folks through the powers that you have and kind of the purpose of the office. Let's say I'm a state employee and I see something I know is just not right. What do I do?
Well, the State Inspector General is set up to receive just those type of complaints. As a matter of fact, the statute very specifically directs us to maintain a website and toll-free hotline for anonymous reporting.
And that's important. They don't have to give their names. They just say...
That's correct. And certainly, if they give us their name, we'll be happy to work with them, but they certainly have the right to remain anonymous. And so what I would encourage them to do, they can go on the Inspector General website, which is very easy to find. All you have to do is go on Google and type in Louisiana Inspector General, and it'll be the first thing that comes up. Also, the toll-free hotline number is on that. And we also accept complaints by fax, by email. If people, however, if they want to walk in, if they want to hand deliver something in writing, we will take all those.
Now, is there a whistleblower statute that protects folks? Because I know most of these folks are going to be concerned about their job. If
Absolutely.
I, spill the beans on my boss, I'm going to get booted.
Well,
how are they protected?
There is a whistleblower protection statute in Louisiana that was recently strengthened in the ethics reform sessions right after Governor Jindal's election, and right after he took office. And what it does is it says that they can't retaliate against you for filing a complaint, and they can't even threaten to retaliate against you now under the statute. And there are remedies under there that would allow you to be reinstated with back pay and all of those sorts of things. And I would strongly encourage the folks who see corruption going on, please report it. That's what we're here to do. We're here. We've got staff that are experienced. We're going to do what we can to protect you. And
all right, and it's not limited to state employees.
Anybody it could be any citizen.
Anything that they believe is incorrect.
Any citizen, that's correct. And there may be times where if we do not have direct jurisdiction over the matter, I'll give you an example. Our jurisdiction extends primarily to the executive branch of government.
Meaning what?
The executive branch would be all of the statewide elected officials, which is the governor, lieutenant governor, treasurer, secretary of state, commissioner of insurance, commissioner of agriculture, and
so huge jurisdiction.
And then the governor and all of his cabinet level agencies.
And anyone, I guess, working under them?
Exactly, all of them.
And anyone they deal with?
And pretty much anyone they deal with. That's exactly right. All of the contractors, subcontractors, grants, all that kind of thing. And so, but if we don't have direct jurisdiction, then we'll engage the agencies that do. And oftentimes they'll ask us to work it with them. And so we're going to screen that complaint very carefully. And if we've got enough information to go on, we will definitely, if you've got fraud or corruption or something that's really wasting taxpayer dollars, we want to hear about it.
And when we say taxpayers' dollars, we're talking about federal taxpayer dollars or state.
Certainly, it applies to federal dollars. Anything that passes through a state agency, and I'll give you a classic example of that, is in the light of all the hurricanes that we've had in this decade. Many, many millions of federal dollars have been passing through these state agencies. And when they're distributed by state agencies, we certainly have jurisdiction to look at that. And with the resources that we've got, we're going to do the best with what we have to try to get to the bottom of those.
Let's talk about the process. So you get a complaint. Take the folks through what happens.
When a complaint hits our door, let's say we get it off the website. Somebody goes on, they use our online complaint form, and they touch the submit button. We have folks that review that every single day. And then it goes in a stack to be screened by our professional staff. And what we'll do is we'll look at the complaint, we'll look at to test it on a number of areas. First of all, is it within our area of jurisdiction? Secondly, does it involve fraud, corruption, abuse, those sorts of things, which are our primary statutory mission? And is there enough information to go on? Like, for instance, if it's an anonymous complaint and it's very vague in nature, it might be harder for us to investigate. Sure. But if it's a very specific complaint and it involves ongoing misconduct or misconduct that involves the theft of public money and that sort of thing.
So an important point here, Stephen, would be give names and numbers and
as much detail
as they have. They don't have to give their name. But they should give the names of the folks who they think are doing something wrong.
That's exactly right.
If they've got dates, if they've got numbers, if
the more information you give, the better it can be. The better it will be for us. Now, that doesn't mean that if you give us a place to start, oftentimes we can take it from there. But many times it's difficult. Like, for instance, if you have a huge institution, like just for an example, a big college, we have jurisdiction over all the public colleges, including LSU and all of the state colleges and universities. There's thousands of departments and thousands of employees, and if you just say, man, they're lying, cheating, and stealing, well, and you don't tell us how, we can't do anything with that.
So be specific.
You can either be the
details.
more specific and the more details you can provide, the better off you.
And then y'all
will be.
review it and determine if you have enough to investigate.
That's correct.
And then what happens? I guess you
if-
investigate?
Right. It could be, if we determine there's not enough, we'll probably close it, or we'll try to, if we have any information, even if it's just an email address, we'll try to follow up with that person and say, even if they're anonymous, they might have an email address and we don't know their identity, but we might know the email address, and we'll just send back, say, well, we need more information.
You'll tell them the outcome.
We'll
of
give
what
them an
you need.
opportunity, right, and then, or to maybe supplement it. But if we decide, for instance, let's say there's a complaint of ongoing criminal activity, and we've had a couple of those, more than a couple actually, but once we find out about that, we'll stick it in the stack of cases to be fully investigated, and we'll assign, for instance, if it's an ongoing criminal conduct, we'll assign criminal staff.
I guess that's a priority.
Correct, absolutely.
If it's
ongoing,
something that's going on
if it's
right
ongoing
now.
and it involves large dollar amounts, or if it's just ongoing corruption, we definitely are going to make that a high priority, and we'll put that at the top of the stack and devote our resources. And now that we're law enforcement, we're geared up actually to be able. We have the equipment, we've got the expertise.
And you have subpoena power.
We have the ability,
by court
absolutely.
order to deliver documents.
We can do criminal investigative subpoenas. We can do search warrants.
If you need somebody to be arrested, you bring the state police in.
And we actually, all of the folks in our criminal investigation division are commissioned officers now through the Louisiana State Police. So we do have the ability to arrest folks under those commissions. Now, most of the time, we will engage other agencies when it's time to make a criminal arrest.
And so you investigate, and if you determine, yes, in fact, this looks bad, you investigate, you determine some crimes are taking place, what happens then?
Well, then we will actually get in and conduct a criminal investigation the same that any other law enforcement agency would do. And that's, you go in, you get to the bottom of it, you find out what the facts are, and you may use any number of investigative techniques.
And then do you turn it over
about.
to prosecutors
Yes.
in the criminal system?
If a case results in arrest, we will definitely refer it to the, if it's a local arrest, we'll refer it to Hill or Moore, the district attorney here in Baton Rouge.
Or you got the Feds, Department of Justice.
Or if it's if it's a federal FBI situation, most of the time what they'll do is we'll refer it to the United States Attorney. We usually work very closely with them. They will present the matter to a grand jury and get an indictment.
And then, as I understand, a report is issued.
Sometimes, we'll issue reports in many cases, but sometimes we may not in a criminal case. It just depends on, first of all, the prosecutor has to be okay with what we want to put out.
Sure.
And so we want to make sure we don't compromise an ongoing criminal case.
Now, what is the discretion of you and the governor? As I understand it, you prepare a report, and the governor is involved in the issuance of the report?
The governor actually, and we have, the statute actually says that the reports are final upon my signature. And so the governor still reviews those, and we allow him the opportunity to sign because this has been such a big
But he doesn't have
part
the
of his
power to
agenda.
hold up the issues.
I don't believe it's not under the statute.
All right, on the next segment, let's talk about some specific cases. This is Locke Meredith, Legal Lines, Stephen Street, the Inspector General for the state of Louisiana. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. Again, pleased to have on the show today Stephen Street. He's the Inspector General for the entire state of Louisiana. Stephen, thanks again. We were talking about kind of the process if somebody files a complaint, how y'all investigate it. If there's criminal components, you bring in those criminal agencies. Y'all are actually law enforcement. It can be prosecuted. Reports are issued sometimes. Governor can or cannot be involved in that. Let's talk about some specific cases. I know last year there was an investigation into the road home.
Right.
And a contractor who had gotten $100 million plus more in money allocated to him than was initially thought.
Right.
And so there was an investigation launched.
That's correct.
Tell the folks about that.
Yeah, we were asked to look into an amendment to the contract with a company called ICF, and they were a Virginia-based company that was brought in to administer the Road Home program.
And again, let's remind folks, Road Home, what was
the
it?
Road Home program was set up in the wake of Hurricanes Katrina and Rita to try to help folks who were the devastation of that storm. You had, a couple of 100,000 homes that were destroyed along the Gulf Coast, and it was an economic recovery effort and an effort to help people get back on their feet.
So this was federal money allocated to us by the federal government. State's supposed to administer it.
That's correct.
Give it to folks who suffered greatly loss.
That's correct. And so we were asked, at the time there was some controversy, this was early in my tenure, when there was public discussion of an amendment to that contract that gave ICF a whole bunch more money.
Seems like it was $120
It was several $100 million, right.
dollars.
And what they did was they increased the ceiling of the contract, and we were asked by the governor and by Paul Rainwater, who's the director of the Louisiana Recovery Authority, to do an investigation of that. And so we sent in our folks and did a very thorough inquiry, and we ultimately found that that amendment was justified, that essentially you had more applications than what they originally...
I think there was like it'd be 115, it turned out to be 150,000.
There were a whole bunch more applications than what were originally anticipated, and then they had a whole bunch of change orders in the contract that drove up costs. And so, we found that there was no wrongdoing in connection with that.
So
and we
it was
did
a
issue
justified
report.
increase in allocation of money to that.
That's correct.
I think you also discovered maybe there's a little turf war going on?
Well, we found some interagency conflict that certainly the Disaster Recovery Unit and the OCD, the Office of Community Development, did not work as well with the Louisiana Recovery Authority and vice versa as they could have.
Which to me is a positive finding,
right.
in the sense that hopefully it encourages interagency
exactly.
cooperation.
And what happened pretty much even prior to our report being released was that the command structure of that whole arrangement was redone to place everything up under Paul Rainwater, and since then it's, as I understand, worked well. But that was just one area that we pointed out that we felt needed improvement.
And what I love, Stephen, too, is, this could have become a big political hot potato.
Correct.
But you guys investigated it and reported it truthfully, and that is there was nothing illegal done here, improper here, which was good, I guess, for Governor Blanco and her group. On the other hand, you did point out there was some deficiencies with interagency communication.
Correct.
Which improved the process.
Right. And what it's important, Locke, for the folks out there to understand that we're not a political agency. That's not our job. We're to find the truth and report it, whatever it is. And I think that that's an example of a situation where I think many were expecting, oh gosh, this is a Republican governor, this is one of his appointees,
right.
maybe he might jump on Governor Blanco with both feet. Well, certainly I would not have done that unless the facts called for me to do that, and the facts did not call for me to do that, and so what we did was report what we found.
Excellent.
And
let's talk about some of the other issues that have developed. As I understand it, there was the police chief of Southern University in New Orleans.
That's correct.
That y'all investigated. Explain that.
Well, that was a situation where we had received a complaint that this chief of police was engaging in bad behavior in a number of areas. But probably the primary thing was that she was using employees that were under her supervision, in other words, other police officers that she supervised as the chief of police, to do personal business, personal errands, driving her around to pick up kids from school, to the dentist, to do shopping,
to
go do work at her house. Well, and the problem is that's such a small police force that when she was doing these things, that their police protection on that campus dwindled down to almost nothing. And then we found that she had not done things that are legally required of her. Like, for instance, she's got to go qualify with her firearm, and she hadn't done that. And so we put out a report, and she ended up there was an arrest warrant for malfeasance, and that matter's been referred for prosecution.
Give the folks some examples. I think there's also been arrest of a Division of Administration employee for
that's a recent case,
felonies.
as a matter of fact. If folks may remember, that showed up on the news a couple of weeks ago, and that's, of course, a pending criminal case.
So can't get into
so what I'll do is talk about what's in the public record, which is, we've received credible information that a person that was in charge of handling retirees' insurance premiums was converting those premium checks to her own use by forging her name on the checks and stealing the money. That's exactly right. And so we put together an arrest warrant and went out, and she was arrested on multiple felony counts, and that matter is going to be referred for criminal prosecution.
I think there's also been an investigation of prison.
Well, there have been, and that's also an investigation that's ongoing, so I can only talk about what's been in the public record, but there's several indictments that have been handed down at the federal level concerning the sale of horses and cattle to bypass the auction process. And also the latest indictment had to do with fertilizer transactions where the state was overbilled by a large sum, up to over $100,000 worth of overbilling for product that they never received. Now, Of course, got to say that's a pending criminal case, and,
Right.
and the subject of those indictments are presumed innocent until they're proven guilty in a court of law. But that is an investigation that we handle jointly with the FBI, and it is still ongoing.
There was also a case, I believe, and you had mentioned earlier that your jurisdiction extends over all of the public education systems, the collegiate systems, and there was an investigation of the Nichols Dean.
Right. Well, it was actually, to be more specific, it was the dean of the Culinary Institute at Nichols, and we had received a complaint and went down there and found some problems with essentially the way they were. The dean was living in a summer home in Michigan and being allowed to work from there, but the records that he was submitting didn't add up when matched up with the phone records and those sorts of things. We pointed that out, and then we also found that they had used the facilities at the school to conduct a wedding reception for family members.
So just misuse of power and position.
Correct. And we pointed out some potential ethics violations there, and of course that's ultimately up to the Board of Ethics to decide, and the administrative law judges to decide whether or not there were any. What we do is uncover the facts and let people know what they are.
And disclose them.
That's correct.
And then I think there was also one where maybe y'all ultimately didn't find that there was a criminal activity, but it sounded like some good things happened in the motor vehicle.
Well, and actually, the Used Motor Vehicle Commission, that was a report that was issued at the end of June over the summer, and there was actually some criminal activity there. We found we received a complaint that a large number of their compliance investigators were not actually working for their paychecks, and so we had to do an extensive surveillance campaign where we put our staff pretty much all the way around the state and put these folks under surveillance for, I believe it was 45 separate days, and concluded that they weren't working, certainly not for what they were being paid. And we ended up issuing a report, and as a result, there's been some large turnover at that commission.
Excellent. Stephen, thank you so much for being
Thanks
on
a
the
lot.
show. It's a
Pleasure to
great
be
job
here.
you're doing, and we thank you for everything that you're doing.
Glad to be here.
for the
Thanks.
state. This is Locke Meredith, Legal Lines, and State Inspector General Stephen Street. Thank you for being with us.